Naoya Inoue's return was never supposed to look like this. For more than a year, the monster had been absent, his rise paused not by an opponent, but by his own body. The image fans carried into 2015 was frozen in violence. Omar Narvaez crumpling under Inoue's power. A champion erased in 2 rounds, the lower weight classes left trembling. But buried beneath that highlight was a fracture in Inoue's right hand, the same hand that had built his reputation. Surgery followed. Rehabilitation followed. Silence followed. And in that silence, doubt crept in, not loudly, but persistently. When Inoue finally stepped back into the ring, the question wasn't whether he was still great. It was whether he was still untouchable. David Carmona believed he wasn't. Carmona didn't arrive as a sacrificial challenger. He arrived as a test. A Mexican warrior shaped by attrition, forged by rounds instead of moments. Carried a record that understated his durability and a reputation that mattered more than numbers. He had never been knocked out. He had been to the edge in world title fights and refused to disappear. He saw Inoue's injury not as an excuse, but as an opening. If timing ever mattered in boxing, this was it. From the opening bell, the contrast was clear. Inoue moved like a fighter who had never been away. His feet were sharp, his posture confident, his eyes cold and focused. Carmona came forward with discipline, gloves high, chin tucked, ready to weather whatever storm arrived. The early seconds were measured, both men probing, but the tension underneath was unmistakable. Everyone was watching the right hand. Everyone was waiting to see if the monster would pull the trigger. He did. The jab snapped out immediately, crisp and authoritative, followed by straight rights that cut through Carmona's guard. Inoue took the center of the ring without asking for it. Carmona was forced backward, absorbing shots on his gloves, adjusting his footing, trying to find a rhythm that wasn't being dictated to him. The speed difference was glaring. The angles were sharper. Inoue wasn't just faster, he was earlier. Yet Carmona didn't fold. He absorbed the pressure, returned fire in short bursts, and stayed composed. He worked the body, tested Inoue's guard, and looked for moments to slow the pace. There was no reckless charge, no attempt to brawl for pride alone. Carmona understood survival, and he understood patience. If Inoue was going to make a mistake, it wouldn't be forced. As the rounds progressed, Inoue's dominance was obvious, but something underneath began to shift. The right hand appeared less frequently. The left hand became the engine. At first it looked like strategy, a champion choosing control over destruction. But as the fight wore on, the truth emerged. Inoue had fractured his right hand again. In an instant, the narrative changed. This was no longer about a dominant champion returning in style. It became a test of adaptability under pressure. Against a man who refused to go away, Inoue was suddenly forced to fight with half his arsenal. For many fighters, that moment would have been the beginning of survival mode. For Inoue, it became the beginning of revelation. He leaned into his left hand and turned it into a weapon of command. The jab wasn't just fast eat, was oppressive. It disrupted Carmona's vision, broke his rhythm, and kept him frozen just long enough for the follow-up. The left hook dug into the body, then snapped upstairs. The angles changed. The tempo shifted. Inoue stopped looking for the finish and started managing the fight with precision. Carmona sensed it. He began to press harder, stepping into exchanges, throwing combinations in hopes of forcing mistakes. He landed occasionally, enough to remind everyone that this wasn't a formality. For the first time in Inoue's career, there were moments where his invincibility felt theoretical rather than absolute. But even then, he never unraveled. Inoue slipped punches by inches, blocked cleanly, and countered with surgical accuracy. He adjusted his stance, experimented with guard variations, and controlled distance without surrendering momentum. What emerged wasn't the monster of highlight reels, but something more dangerous. A complete fighter thinking in real time. The crowd felt it. The expectation of a violent ending slowly gave way to a deeper tension. Carmona was still standing. He was battered, marked, and clearly behind on the scorecards, but he was refusing to fall. Each round that passed without a knockdown added weight to the moment. This wasn't about whether Inoue could knock someone out. It was about whether he could dominate without doing so. As the later rounds approached, Carmona grew more desperate. He knew the math. He knew the only way to change the outcome was to force chaos. He attacked the body through looping hooks and tried to draw Inoue into exchanges where pain and pressure could override control. Inoue responded by tightening everything. His defense sharpened. His counters became more selective. He struck when Carmona overcommitted, then stepped away, refusing to give ground unnecessarily. In the final moments, Inoue surged, not with reckless abandon, but with resolve. He unleashed combinations fueled by willpower, pushing through pain to remind everyone that control still belonged to him. Carmona staggered under the pressure, driven backward, visibly damaged, but still upright. The finish hovered in the air, close enough to taste, but it never arrived. When the final bell rang, there was no collapse. No exclamation point. Just truth. The decision was clear. Inoue retained his super flyweight title by unanimous decision, marking only the second time in his career he had gone the distance. The scorecards told the story of control, but they also told something else. Carmona had taken rounds from Naoya Inoue. More than that, he had forced him into unfamiliar territory and survived. For Carmona, the loss carried respect. He had stood in front of the monster at less than full strength and refused to break. For a fighter built on toughness, that mattered. For Inoue, the night was transformative. He didn't leave with another knockout for the highlight reel. He left with proof. Proof that his greatness wasn't dependent on one hand, one moment, or one style. He showed that, even compromised, even tested, he could dominate at the highest level. The monster didn't fade when the path changed. He adapted. This fight didn't diminish his aura. It expanded it. Because sometimes, the most important chapters aren't written in destruction, but in restraint. Not in endings, but in endurance.